My name is Mike Morford. Some of you may know me as co-host of the podcast Criminology. I'd like to tell you about a solo podcast that I host, which is very close to my heart. It's called The Murder in My Family. We've all heard about horrible murder cases in the news, both solved and unsolved. Most of the time, we listen for a moment and then go about our daily routine. But have you ever wondered who those murder victims were? Or thought about their backgrounds? They're more than a blurb in the news or a statistic. They were real people living real lives. They were someone's child, parent, sibling, or friend. In The Murder in My Family, I try to get to know those victims with the help of the people that knew them best, their family members. Together, we talk about the lives and tragic deaths of their loved ones, as well as the ripple effect the murder has had on surviving friends and family. Some of the episodes feature high-profile cases you're probably familiar with, like the Colonial Parkway murders, the Delphi murders, or the Golden State Killer murders. But many other cases are ones from small towns all over America that barely made the news. There are dozens of episodes of The Murder in My Family available right now to binge on. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
On September 18th, 2020, Brandi Garcia was fed up with her abusive boyfriend. She had had enough, and she decided to leave him for good. So she started to get her kids ready to leave. She called her dad so that he could come and get her and the kids, and she could finally escape into a life of happiness. No one could know that this would be the day that Brandi died. I am Eric Carter-Landin, and this is True Consequences. As always on True Consequences, I want to start this story by telling you about who Brandi was and what she meant to her family. She is forever missed by those who love her. Listen to Brandi's sister, Tiffany, describe her older sister.
You know, my sister, when we were growing up, she was the cool girl. And I say that because she was just such a light. Anyone around her was just drawn to her. She was funny, goofy. Sometimes I used to think she overdid the goofy, you know, because she, for the life of her, she would never say cinnamon. She would always just say synonym or, you know, things like that. So she was just a really goofy person, really fun to be around. I just remember being a little girl and I just used to bug her, always wanting to go in her room. And, you know, I'd be like, hey, let me hang out with you. I won't tell mom and dad what you're doing, you know, stuff like that. Or, you know, just she had a water bed in her room and that was just our thing. You know, she loved music. That was like a huge part of her. So we just lay on that water bed. She had a black light in her room and I just always want to be around her, you know, lay on that bed with her, me and my little sister. And of course, we have another sister, my oldest. They would always hang out, you know, but she would be the one to let me be around her more than my oldest sister, I guess. So we'd listen to music. We loved slow jams, things like that. We used to paint her walls with the glow paint, you know, black light. It looks so cool. She was just such a light in my life. And I used to always just think when I was younger how much I wanted to be like her, you know, just to be that funny, just to be that free. And, you know, she was just really happy back then. She had the most beautiful handwriting. I mean, she wrote on everything. She used to even write on, like, her body, you know, just sit there drawing on her leg or her arm and even on us. That's one thing I'm actually really excited about. I'm going to be getting a tattoo in her honor, and I found our old middle school yearbook. And I had got, you know, so sad because when all this happened, we lost pretty much everything of hers. So I didn't have nothing that had her writing on it. And that's just one thing I always remembered, you know, her beautiful handwriting. So I found my yearbook and it's a whole page that she wrote, you know, me like as a note, you know, how back then in our day, we used to sign the yearbooks and stuff like that. But it was a whole page and, you know, she just used to always write at the end of it, love you, sister, and always and forever, you know. So I'm going to be getting that part of that tattooed on me. That way I can carry it with me forever. She was in cheerleading for a while. Her and my older sister, they cheered for the Bulldogs for a little while. My girls cheer now, but yeah, they were in with the Bulldogs for a little while. Other than that, she just was in school, hang out with her friends. Friends were always a big thing for her. She had my nephew when she was 16, so she was a teen mom. And, after that, how things kind of settle down. You're not the party girl or go hang out, all that stuff.
You're forced to grow up at that point, right?
Yeah.
Kids will do that to you.
Oh, yeah. I just want to say that, I know there's so many people in this, world, our world, Albuquerque, that were touched by her. And I really wish that she had the chance to know how important she was to everyone. I feel like she kind of never really felt that about herself. And that's something that I think about often is because, I know I'd always tried to express it to her, but I just wish she's seen herself from my sight or all these other people's sight, because anyone that she's met, she impacted them. She never put herself first. She always wanted to make sure everyone else was okay. She would be dealing with so many things in her mind, but that was never out there. She always, I'm okay. She'd always used to say I'm okay. Oh, I'll be fine. And how are you? Worrying about everybody else. And I really just wish that she had the chance to see what I saw when we were growing up.
Brandi had many struggles in her life. As I always say, there is no such thing as a perfect victim. Brandi was not a perfect human. She had her struggles and challenges in life. Tiffany shared with me some of these challenges that Brandi faced.
So my sister, in around 2013, 2014, she was diagnosed with cervical cancer. She had to get her full-blown, hysterectomy. She got her cervix removed. I believe one of her fallopian tubes, as well as an ovary removed. That surgery was unsuccessful. They actually punctured her bladder when they did the surgery. And, so that caused a lot of problems. She almost died. She got sepsis. She had to have emergency surgery right after that. She had a colostomy bag. She had tubes in her kidneys. It was really bad. And, she was very young, and nobody wants to go through that when you're in your your early 20s.
Yeah.
And it's not what she thought was going to happen. It was the worst possible outcome.
Sure.
From that moment, she was prescribed multiple drugs. She was prescribed Valium and Xanax, which is something they usually don't prescribe together. She was prescribed opioids, the highest dose, the maximum amount. She was always a very tiny person, 110, 120 wet, very, very small person. And, it just was really excessive. And from that point, she kind of got a dependence.
Sure.
And that happens.
Yeah.
Too much. So from that point, it's like a gateway for the other drugs.
Sure.
Or even, you use them differently, the pills.
Absolutely.
And from that point, it just kind of went further and further. She got deeper into it. Then her partner, who she was with before, the one who took her life, was in it with her as well. And when you have a codependent relationship like that, it only makes your problem so much worse. So it was just kind of like a after effect, boom, boom, just kept getting deeper into it. And she did have a few stints in jail. She spent, some time in jail because of that, or, just other things. So I definitely agree with you on the stigma there. I feel like that's one thing that has come up multiple times, during hearings we've had. Oh, look at her drug habits. Her autopsy report had that, showed that she had multiple drugs in her system. Okay, well, she was erratic. She wasn't in her mind, but she's still a human.
Yeah.
And we're all human.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier, it doesn't matter what we've been through, what we're going through. Not one life is more important than another.
100% agree. You never know what situations people are going to find themselves in. It doesn't matter what they're doing. So thank you for sharing that about Brandi. I know it's hard to deal with people who have that kind of mentality. I do hope that it changes as people talk about it more, because honestly, I have family members who struggle with addiction, and the story is almost exactly the same. An opioid addiction, it completely takes over your physiology. It destroys people's lives. So before we go any further in this story, I want to discuss some national statistics on domestic violence with you. This information is coming from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence website, and I will be reading this verbatim for you. I think it's important to point out that when a victim of intimate partner violence decides to leave their abusive partner, they are 75% more likely to be murdered than if they stayed. On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner contact sexual violence, and or intimate partner stalking with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, post-traumatic stress disorder, use of victim services, contraction of sexually transmitted diseases, etc. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. This includes a range of behaviors like slapping, shoving, pushing, and in some cases might not be considered domestic violence. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men have been injured by an intimate partner. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence. For example, beating, burning, strangling by an intimate partner in their lifetime. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men have been stalked by an intimate partner during their lifetime to the point in which they felt very fearful or believed that they or someone close to them would be harmed or killed. On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide. Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime. I'm going to repeat this again. Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime in the United States. Let that sink in for a minute. Women between the ages of 18 to 24 are most commonly abused by an intimate partner. A study of intimate partner homicides found that 20% of victims were not the intimate partners themselves, but family members, friends, neighbors, people who intervened, law enforcement responders, or even just bystanders. 72% of all murder-suicides involve an intimate partner, and 94% of the victims of these murder-suicides are female. Now, when we look at children in domestic violence, and again, I'm still reading verbatim from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence website, 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year, and 90% of these children are eyewitnesses to this violence. Now, you may be asking, why are you talking about all of this? I think it's really important to understand how big of a problem domestic violence is in this country, not just in New Mexico, in the country, and I would even say in the world. It is such a pervasive problem that if you think about it, either you or someone you know has been a victim of some sort of intimate partner violence. I'm guaranteeing that that's the case. If you're a person who doesn't know somebody who's been affected, that probably means that they didn't tell you. But I think it's pervasive enough to where we have to talk about this issue. Now, I don't want to stray too far from Brandi's story because it's really important that we get through that, but I do want to take a moment to just think about how pervasive this issue is in our society. Why are we not willing to talk about it? Why is there so much shame and stigma associated with being a victim of domestic violence? We've got to do better. The only way we're going to change this is if we discuss it. Okay, I've ranted enough. Let's get back into Brandi's story.
So she started dating this guy. His name's Robert Mentz. She was only with him for almost a year. He was, their relationship was getting pretty violent. There was a lot of, domestic violence going on. When she would come around us, which was rare, she got very isolated with him. I know they were both using together. He didn't allow her to visit us. He didn't really allow her to see her kids. They were living with our parents at the time, and so they would visit her here and there. She would come over with a black eye or cut or bruises here or there. And it was just so hard to talk to her. We would not be able to talk to her. She wouldn't respond, or we wouldn't know what phone number to reach her at. It was just very, very much isolated from, seeing us. A couple of weeks before this happened, she was reaching out to me more. And I was really happy about that. Let us help you. Please, you don't need to do this. You don't need to deal with this. We can get you out. Come and let us help you. I'm okay. Like I said earlier, I'm okay. I'll be okay. I'm always okay. That was her thing. I'm always okay. I'm about 5 minutes away from my parents' house, 5 to 8 minutes. My mom calls me. She's screaming. And, I couldn't understand her at first. And she's just screaming Brandi's dead. He killed her. And I'm like, what? What do you know? What do you mean? And she goes on to tell me that he ran her over. And where are you? I need you to get here. I can't go. I'm with the kids. And my dad had went to go and get her from this situation. He was beating on her, and her and the kids had fled. So my dad was gone. He went to go try to get her. I'm screaming. I'm freaking out. Worst day, the worst possible thing you can hear. And I'm just, so I'm in denial. This can't be real. She's going to be okay. Well, I arrive and I pick up my mom and one of her kids, my sister's oldest son, and one of my nephews. We're driving there. My parents, they live in the north, but not northeast. And my sister, at the time where this took place, she was in an apartment off of Wantabo Central area. The street actually is called Dorado, but it's in the Western Skies area. So it took us a while to get there, kind of not knowing what to expect. We're freaking out. So we drive up, and we just drive up right away, and we see the red van, my dad's van, and we see him and the kids, kind of sitting there. There's caution tape everywhere. We get out, and we don't see my sister because this whole altercation, it took place like down a whole street and a cul-de-sac, and he chased them in his vehicle for a while. So it wasn't even in front of their apartment. We were looking for the apartment, but we got stopped. My sister, we couldn't see her. She wasn't there. They had my dad and the kids over here. And let me just tell you, when you see not only your parents dealing with that type of traumatic grief, my dad, he was there. He was part of it. He witnessed everything. That is just so incredibly hard. But then you look over and you see these innocent children, my niece and nephew, 8 and 9 years old when this happened. They've seen everything. They were right there whenever she was killed. And that's one of the hardest parts in this situation, is because there's not one victim here, and those kids will never be the same. My parents, they get a phone call around 6:30 or 7. My sister called from a neighbor's house. She had fled the apartment. Apparently, he was hitting her, threatening her with a screwdriver, and I think he might have hit her on the back of the head with it. So she was injured, and, he was threatening to harm her and the kids. And she called my mom and dad, "I need you to come and get me right now, please. We're fighting. He's going to hurt us." My dad gets there incredibly fast. He rushed over there right away. He pulls up, and, he finds the house. My sister sent the address. As soon as they come out and start getting in the van, Robert comes with his SUV, my sister's SUV, and he blocks them in. And this is what really bugs me, because his mother was also there in her vehicle. She helped block my sister and my dad in, and she has not been charged. And it just doesn't make any sense to me, because she also helped him flee. So that happened. They're blocked in. My sister and my dad are trying to get out. My dad didn't know the neighborhood, so he was kind of trying to figure out how to get out of there. In that he started to ram his vehicle into my dad's van. And that moment, all I could think of is that my sister got out of that car to tell him to stop, because she was so afraid, because the kids were in the backseat screaming. So she got out of the vehicle, and in that moment, he grabs her by her hair. They're arguing from him in the car, her in the vehicle. He grabs her by the hair, and that's what's in this particular situation is part of where they're saying it's causing a little bit of the charges are not adding up, because there's some statements where it says she got on the running board and he took off. And then there's statements that clearly say he did grab her by the hair and take off. So she's grabbed by the hair, but this is, what, of course, what my dad and the kids seen. He takes off full speed, accelerates. My sister is on there. And I don't know how, but somehow my dad managed to run around before he took off, and he tried to jump on to get him to stop the car. And he has my sister by the hair, and he's accelerating 30, 35, 40, I don't know how many miles an hour. He lets go of my sister's hair, and that's when she fell. And he first runs, he stops, and in some of the statements it'll say he stops, then runs her over, after he realized that she fell. And then he's continuing down the street, trying to get my dad to fly off. He's ramming my dad into multiple vehicles on the side of the street. My dad falls off of the vehicle, finally, and he had rammed him into a few different cars. So my dad took everything he could to stand up, and he looks, and he's walking back that way, and he screams because Robert turned around, and he's heading full speed back to my sister in the road, and my niece and nephew standing right next to her body, and he was trying to run them all over. And before my dad fell off, he was yelling at my dad, "There will be 2 fucking dead bodies in the street today." And then he knocked my dad off the car. My dad, like I said, he took everything out of him to stand up, to start going. And
sure, yeah.
He yells and tells my niece and nephew to get out of the way. And they barely make it out of the way before he goes back. He turns back around, gets out of the car, and he's standing over my sister's body. And he's telling her, "Fuck you, bitch. Look what you made me do." And I don't think that's a remorseful person. That don't sound like an accident. You don't go back and you don't try to finish the job. And the children, you see the children, you just kill their mom in front of them. You get out of the car and you yell at a body of somebody you claim to love. No, that is not human, and that is not an accident. And so from that point, he got back in the vehicle, sped off. And at this point, the vehicle's already torn to shreds. There's no tires in the front. They fell off. He's riding on a rim. It's smashed up. He called his mom. She came back for him. She hid him in her vehicle trunk, and then she tried to leave. Multiple reports said we saw him get into this white Ford Fusion. The cops were able to track it down. They assessed her. They talked to her, find him in the trunk. And I don't know why, but she was not charged. What kind of person will sit there and help your son to batter a woman? You're a woman. And even if you weren't, even if you're a man, whatever, it doesn't matter. You're a human. She should have seen this situation, told her son, let him go, and not try to stop her from leaving. And I just wanted to add that this is not his first time dealing with, domestic violence or child endangerment. He used to live in Colorado. We had found that out eventually through the courts. Well, we knew he came from Colorado, our sister told us. But we had later found out that he had a wife out there. He severely abused her. She has a restraining order on him, a very lengthy one. So I don't know how, but she found out what he did out here. And she reached out to the court to say something. So they were aware of it. And they didn't know anything about that. His priors out there, he has several counts of, domestic violence, child endangerment, things like that. So it's clear this is a repetitive thing. They arrested him, and he's been there since. Thank God we fought for that. They tried a few times already to get him out on bail. I made a change.org petition. Me and my parents have been at every hearing, done everything that we could to stop that from happening.
Everybody who listens to the show knows that that's a huge problem here in New Mexico. People being released. Repeat offenders being released pending trial, not even with bail, just sent home, some with ankle monitors, some without. It's happening so much.
I will not stay quiet. My sister's not here. She doesn't have a voice anymore, but I'm her voice, and I will be her voice. Yeah. And just speaking of, him being in jail and us fighting for her justice, I wanted to bring up the fact that he got another charge while in there for bribery. He tried to bribe a fellow cellmate to harm my family. Yeah, he wanted to pay someone money to hurt my dad and, quote, which is what the story said and what we were told, to scare him to not, fight in the trial or to not speak in the trial.
Now, I do have in my possession the police reports from the initial investigation as well as some of the supplemental reports. I'm going to read just a little bit of the police report for you from the first responding officer. This is dated September 18th, 2020. And again, I'm going to read this verbatim. I was dispatched to the intersection of Dunes Court and Dunes Road Southeast. A tire belonging to a vehicle involved in a homicide was located at the intersection. On September 18th, 2020 at 18:57 hours, Officer S. Callanan and I were dispatched to a 911 hang-up call in the area of 12707 Dunes Road Southeast. The 911 operator heard multiple subjects yelling and a male voice yelling for police officers. The line disconnected and the 911 operator was unable to get further information on a callback as the male subject never picked up the phone again. While Officer Callanan and I were en route, another call for service was generated in the same area wherein the calling party told the 911 operator that a male subject intentionally ran over a female subject and that the female subject was deceased. Officer Callanan and I were flagged down on Dunes Road by a number of passers-by who directed us to 12720 Dunes Road, Southeast, number B, where the male subject had apparently fled. Passers-by indicated that the male subject was seen to run into that residence. The subject was said to have been driving a brown Chevrolet Tahoe. As I approached the listed address, I could see what appeared to be pieces of a wheel assembly in the roadway. An unoccupied brown Chevrolet Tahoe was parked in front of the residence. Officer Callanan and I, along with other officers, were able to clear the vehicle visually. I remained with the vehicle until I was relieved by Sergeant Niprath. While at the scene, a red minivan approached officers. The driver of the minivan told me that he had the victim's children inside of the vehicle. I called for additional officers to respond to secure the vehicle and identify the occupants. Officers D. Schrauf and R. Blee arrived on scene and took charge of identifying the occupants of that vehicle. I did not conduct any investigation into this incident, nor did I interview any witnesses. I uploaded my lapel camera footage into evidence.com. This concludes my involvement. And now I'm going to read verbatim from the transcripts of a briefing related to this investigation. On September 18th, 2020, at approximately 19:01 hours, officers with the Albuquerque Police Department were dispatched to a domestic dispute call at 12839 Dorado Drive Southeast. Dispatch stated a male subject intentionally hit a female with his vehicle and run over her. According to dispatch, someone was dead. A female was not breathing. Dispatch stated the male was last headed eastbound on Dorado Drive in a gold Chevrolet Tahoe. Officers arrived at the intersection of Dorado Place and Dorado Drive, where they observed multiple people on the southwest corner waving and trying to get the officers' attention. Officers continued west on Dorado Drive until they observed an object in the street covered by a blanket. Multiple bystanders stated that it was the female and that she was dead. Officer Schilling lifted the blanket and observed her. She was unresponsive. Officer Schilling advised the female was deceased and was in front of 12842 Dorado Drive Southeast. Officer Schilling advised multiple canvas forms were filled out and witnesses located. The victim was identified as Brandi Garcia, and her father, Charles Schnitt, and Brandi's 2 children were on scene when the incident occurred. During the briefing, Officer T. Rosenberg provided the following information. Upon Officer Rosenberg's arrival, it was broadcast that a unit was needed behind the residence of 12720 Dunes, as the male, later identified as Robert Mintz, had run from a vehicle into a bottom floor apartment located at 12720 Dunes. Officer Rosenberg headed towards Singing Arrow Avenue Southeast to position behind the apartment. Several kids were out in the cul-de-sac at the ice cream truck. They asked Officer Rosenberg if she was looking for someone. Officer Rosenberg was informed a male subject ran through the cul-de-sac and onto Singing Arrow Drive Southeast. They described him as a white male with dreadlocks, wearing a black shirt, baggy pants, and a red bandana around his neck. Officer Rosenberg was flagged down by a male in a yellow car while traveling on Singing Arrow. The unknown male in the yellow car advised the male the police were looking for had gotten into a white vehicle that was continuing south right in front of Officer Rosenberg. Officer Rosenberg continued west on Singing Arrow behind the white Ford sedan bearing New Mexico plates. The vehicle was stopped at Wantabo Boulevard and Southern Avenue, signaling to go north. The driver, later identified as Angel Romero, complied with Officer Rosenberg's instructions while contacting Angel. She advised Officer Babcock, who was assisting on the traffic stop, that her son was in the trunk of the vehicle. After giving announcements, officers observed movement on the passenger side of the vehicle. A male popped up with his hands in the air, empty, facing officers through the rear window. The male exiting the vehicle was wearing a black shirt, dark baggy pants, had hair in dreadlocks, and a red bandana, patterned face mask around his neck. The description matched that given by the kids who observed him running down Rainbow Court. The male was compliant and taken into custody by officers on scene and placed into Officer Rodriguez's vehicle. He was identified as Robert Mintz. Robert Mintz began making statements that he could not breathe. Officer Rodriguez transported Mintz to the hospital for medical treatment. On September 18, 2020, at 22:27 hours, Detective Herrera and I conducted a recorded interview with Angel Romero. The interview was conducted inside the MCST van, and during the interview, Angel stated the following. On September 18, 2020, Angel received a phone call from her son, Robert Mintz, who stated that he was having a domestic dispute with his girlfriend and asked Angel to come home. Shortly thereafter, Angel received a phone call from Brandi, who stated that she was in a domestic dispute with Robert and asked Angel to come to the house. Angel arrived at their home address of 12720 Dunes Road Southeast, Unit B, but no one was home. Angel left the residence when she saw her son's vehicle at the neighbor's house. Angel stopped and noticed Robert and an unknown male were in a verbal dispute. As the argument continued, Brandi appeared and began yelling at Robert. Angel tried to break up the argument when the unknown male threatened to hit her. Robert got into his vehicle and left the neighbor's house. Brandi, her kids, and the male got into a red van and left the neighbor's house and headed towards Brandi's residence. Angel went to Robert and Brandi's residence, but no one was there. Angel decided she would leave and go to her boyfriend's house when she noticed the red van at Dorado Drive and Dorado Place. Angel drove down to Dorado Drive and saw Brandi on the ground. She appeared to be dead. Angel noticed Brandi's kids were running around where Brandi was deceased on the ground. Angel tried to call Robert, but there was no answer. Angel called 911 but left the scene before officers arrived. Angel went back to the residence on Dunes to look for Robert, but no one was there. Angel headed to her boyfriend's house again when she received a phone call from Robert. Robert told Angel that he was on Sparrow Street and told her to come get him. Angel picked up Robert, and when Robert got into the car, he stated, "I don't know what happened. I blacked out." As Angel began to drive, she was stopped by officers and detained. Robert was located inside the vehicle and was also detained. There are so many eyewitness statements that talk about what happened when the eventual murder of Brandi occurred, as well as the attempted murder of Brandi's children.
There's no charges of attempted murder on my dad. There's no charges of even attempted murder on the kids.
Or conspiracy.
Right. They're saying that there's no proof of intent.
You charge them with bribery.
And I mean, and not only was this like just a vehicular homicide, but he hunted them down. But they're trying to say, oh, it's just, vehicular homicide, great bodily harm resulting in death, and that's just ridiculous to me.
It's because it's an easier case to prove. First degree murder, proving intent is very, very challenging. I mean, right. I'm not saying that what they're doing is right, because I don't agree with it. But I do know from my own family's case, my brother's cases, that's what they're having a hard time with, is proving that he intended to do it.
Right.
Aside from, unless somebody wrote a letter, said, I'm going to kill this person. That's really what they want.
Yeah. And that's unrealistic.
It is unrealistic. I think the standard it's too high.
Yeah.
It's too high.
It is. And our time and, the sentencing that they want to give these violent people is too low.
Yeah. Well, life in prison is only 30 years.
Yeah. One of the hearings that we had, just seeing his face is hard. It's just so hard. I will look at him because I'm not afraid of him. And I won't let him intimidate me or my family. And I won't let him take anything else from us. So I look at him, we haven't had any face-to-face, but it's through video. But he looks so empty and just evil and no remorse. And he actually had the chance to speak for one of the hearings. He wrote a letter to the judge, not once mentioning my sister, not once mentioning that she was a person and he took her life, not once apologizing to my family, to her kids. He was bragging on himself. Oh, I'm changed. I'm going to school. I'm taking programs. I want to be a better person, Judge. Okay, but a person who is sorry or wants to be better, wouldn't you at least acknowledge the life that you stole?
It's classic abuser behavior.
Yeah.
Right? I've been caught. I'm very sorry. I'm going to do better. And then if he gets out, it's going to be the same thing all over again with somebody else.
Oh, yeah. I've always watched crime documentaries and things like that, but you never really feel, you look at it on the outside, and you're like, wow, that's obvious, it's horrible, it's awful. But when you're in that situation, it's just completely different.
That's something that I talk about a lot is, I think true crime can be very exploitive. And there's a lot of people making a lot of money off of the backs of victims and their families.
Oh, I see that. Yeah.
And that's not to say I don't think that there's anything wrong for getting paid for what you're doing.
Of course not.
But I think the way you do it says a lot about who you are.
Yeah.
And a lot of people seem to forget that we're talking about real life. We're talking about real people with real feelings, and it's not a movie. It's not a TV show. It's not a story that was made up. It is real.
For us, that's our family member. That's, somebody we love, care about them,
Now that you've heard about what happened, let's listen to what you can do to help the family of Brandi Garcia.
Say her name. That's one thing. I don't ever want her name to not be said. I feel like the more we talk about them, the more we speak their name, do it, If you can, reach out to me, show up in the hearing, I wouldn't mind that. We have to put pressure on them. We have to let them know that they're not just a number. It's not just your next homicide, your open and closed case. This is my sister. This is her life. And he deserves so much more time than they're offering us. We got sentenced to life without her. Her kids, they don't have a mom. I don't have a sister. My parents do not have their daughter. And I mean, we just need it to stop. And I just really want to really say, domestic violence is just so horrible. And we need to put a stop to that. We need better laws there as well, because there's this repeating cycle. And not one more woman, not one more child, mother, even, not only women, other, men are getting abused as well. But not one more life should be taken. And I just want to really fight for her. I want you to say her name and remember who she was as a person.
If you can share this episode with people in your social circle, that would make a huge difference as well, because the more people know this story, the more pressure that is put on the district attorney's office.
And like I said, She was a beautiful person before all the bad things in her life. And she didn't deserve to leave this earth the way that she did. Nobody deserves that. We couldn't even say goodbye to her properly, Yeah. But I know that she's watching down on us. I know she brought me here today, and she's with me every day that I fight for her. I'm wearing my butterfly dress because that was her favorite thing. She loved butterflies. And I won't give up.
Justice for Brandi Garcia.
Justice for Brandi. Thank you. Say her name as much as you can.
Finally, the families asked me to share some of their thoughts with you as we wrap this episode up. From Brandi's mom, Sandra. My beautiful Brandi, I miss you so much. Not a day goes by that I don't think of you and miss your beautiful face, your smile, how silly you were, how loving, how caring. I'm never going to hear your voice again, and how you used to say, "We love you, Ma." You always hug me so tight. I will never feel your touch, and I hurt so bad, deep in my soul, thinking about the never again. But I hold you in my heart forever. I love you, my baby girl, forever, Ma. From her daughter. I love you, Mom. I wish you were here with me right now. I really miss you so much. I can't stop thinking about you. It's not the same without you. Every time I get sad, I cry and think about you. I will never stop loving you. From her niece, Emily. Auntie, I miss you so much. I can't stop thinking about you. I think about you every day, Auntie. I love you. As we wrap up this episode, I'd like you to know that the family has decided to pursue a trial and are awaiting a court date. They denied a plea deal and would love you to continue to support the Justice for Brandi movement by sharing this episode and saying Brandi Garcia's name. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, New Mexico.